Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We're here today to talk a little bit about drone safety. We've partnered with AUVSI's Silicon Valley chapter to pull this presentation together for everyone here. I've got a great panel of participants and speakers with us today to talk about drone safety for the FAA and DOT's Drone Safety Awareness Week. So this panel discussion that we're going to have today is called Critical Perspectives in UAS Safety, a look into the technological, procedural, and public safety angles into safe drone operations. And we've got an amazing panel here before you today. First, we have myself and Cliff Sweet. We work together at AKIN GUMP in Advanced Aviation Practice. I'm Justin Towles, and I've got a long background in aviation, especially in drones and urban mobility, where I've worked a lot with FAA previously, representing airports at the National Association. Also been involved in a lot of aviation rulemaking committees, Drone Advisory Committee, Unmanned Aircraft Safety Team, built a coalition that was focused on UAS safety, and then eventually built a company before coming over here to AKIN GUMP. And my colleague Cliff also has a long and illustrious career in aviation. He's a commercial pilot for many years, worked at the FAA and was a program manager for the first 2 type certifications of UAS. Did a lot of work up in Alaska, where one of our speakers is coming from today. And then after that, he was also an ASI, safety inspector for the FAA, and then went up to ICAO to work on remotely piloted aircraft systems, RPAS, and then to World Food Program under the United Nations for their operations based out of Rome. And again, today we have a great panel, and I want to introduce all of them very, very briefly. But we'll start with Amber McDonald. Amber is coming to us today, like I said, from Alaska. She is the CEO of Indemnis. Indemnis is a company that has a number of products, but their line really focuses around technological safety for UAS and has basically termination devices such as parachutes, essentially for drones, and they're being deployed successfully around the country and beyond in a growing, really prosperous and promising company. Amber is the CEO there, but she's really been an entrepreneur her entire life, starting a number of companies, and is the founding member of Indemnis and leads the operations since the company's formation, and is in charge of finance division, marketing, sales, business development, strategic partnerships, and federal contracting, as well as FAA compliance areas. And then we have Tom Walker is with us, and we get a chance to work with Tom quite a bit. Tom is the CEO of DroneUp, another really, really promising and very rapidly growing company in the UAS world. They're a key operator, primarily operating under Part 107 with operations across the country, and have a lot of really, really cool use cases, many of which I hope we'll hear from today. Tom is also a former a military officer, where he kind of pioneered a lot of the strategy development in digital reform with the U.S. government. He's also served as an advisor to the White House on innovative technologies and how their impact can affect the emerging workforce. And then last but not least, we have Charles Werner. So Charles is probably the key voice in public safety UAS in the country and beyond. Charles has had a 46-year career in public safety, spent 37 years within the Charlottesville Fire Department, with the last 10 of them serving as the fire chief down there. He also worked with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, has led a number of drone safety organizations, most recently leading the organization DroneResponders, where they've really been active across the entire country. With that, I'm going to turn over to my colleague Cliff, that can set up the discussion that we're going to have today.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Justin, for that lead-in. I guess I could say that safety is in my blood. I was fortunate enough to learn safety from some professionals who are also experts in their field, and also lucky enough to work and enable operations with all that safety experience where it could be put to use. And Justin kind of put some highlights of my background out, but just a high level overview. Was a rescue swimmer, airline pilot, and union leader, and initiated FAA safety programs like ASAP and FOQA. Then went over to the FAA, was an ASI and air carrier operations, but immediately put into the UAS program. And a lot of our initial work was on safety risk management panels. So we use those to enable UAS operations. So since the UAS market really doesn't exist without safety, we're going to investigate UAS safety from 3 angles today. First angle is going to be technology. We'll talk about best practices of how that tech has been leveraged for safe operations. And then we'll move right into operations. We'll hear some practical applications of how mitigations have been added to operational scenarios to keep them safe and protect others in the airspace as well as people and property on the ground. And then the final angle will just be public safety, or how another I don't want to call it a catchphrase, but maybe that's what it is, how UAS is used for good and how UAS can be leveraged to help keep the public safe. And so now we're going to hear from each panelist to give a little bit more about themselves. And to kick that off, we're going to first go to Amber McDonald of Indemnis. Welcome, Amber.
Thank you. And thanks, Justin, for inviting me to present today. As you know, all of us are in the drone industry. We all know that drones cut costs, create efficiencies, make things easier. But one of our biggest hurdles is safety. And for us personally here at Indemnis, it's flight over populated areas, and how can we make that safe for the rest of the world? So Indemnis was actually founded back in 2014. So in drone years, that's a really long time. And we were drone operators. We were operating for video production and found that, like any sort of technology, it can be unreliable, which prevented a big problem. We had some drones that failed, fell out of the sky. We bought every system that existed on the market back then and instigated failures and found that absolutely none of them worked. So we went to the drawing board and decided to create our own. And that is really how Indemnis was formed. Today, we're the global leader in parachute recovery systems. The core of our technology is an inflatable tube. So we take a normal parachute, we invert our tube and stuff the parachute inside of it. And then in the event of a failure, we inflate that tube, which launches the parachute at 140 miles an hour. And what makes our system novel is that that tube stays rigid and the attachment point of the parachute actually stays outside of the roll radius. So as it's rolling and tumbling to the ground, there's zero chance of that ever entangling. And I actually have a really quick video because sometimes it's easier to see. Play that for you really quick. Awesome. So as you can see from the video, even in a roll and tumble situation, the drone can spin as many times as it does, and our tube prevents that from entangling. So why is that important? When we launched our product in 2017, we thought we were going to change the world. We were going to sell drone parachutes to everyone, and then quickly realized that regulation had not yet caught up with the technology. And we really took that on. So my CTO, Alan Erickson, worked hand in hand with ASTM and the FAA, along with a lot of others from our team. And we eventually, after a year and a half, 18 months, we created the parachute standard, which is used across the globe at this point. So the ASTM parachute standard is F332218 for those that are unfamiliar. And it's really a scaled down version of our internal testing matrix. And what it does is it shows that in any scenario, the drone that can fail, the parachute will work effectively. So you can hover, kill the motors, will it work? Forward flight, kill the motors, will it work? That's one motor, two motors, critical number of motor failures. It could be 3 motors, depending on how many motors are on your drone. So it's just really validating to the FAA and other regulatory bodies that in any failure scenario, your parachute system does work and that it has been tested. So that is something that Indemnis has worked really hard on. We've also done more deployments than the majority of the universities and institutions. We probably have one of the biggest libraries, if not the biggest library, of drone failure dynamics and deployments. Definitely in the country, maybe in the world, who knows? We definitely have thousands of them under our belts at this point. So one thing that we like to pride ourselves on is that we take a hobby grade aircraft piece of technology and we can make it aviation safe. And we add that extra level of safety and put those bells and whistles on there that make people feel safe. It is safe, it's proven, and it really protects life and property on the ground. So in case something does go wrong, we're that just in case level of safety, the seatbelt for the sky, and we're here in case you need us. So that's what we do at Indemnis, and would love to talk more about it as we go through the questions today.
Okay, thank you very much, Amber. So next up, we're going to shift over now to operations and Tom Walker, CEO of DroneUp, for some discussions of best practices, procedures, and training that enhance safety. So Tommy, we know you've been very busy in the space. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Welcome.
Thanks. I just got an email link that we made TMZ, and of all the publications that I've been in, I think that's one I haven't done yet. So TMZ and Telemundo in 1 week, and so I made two new frontiers. You know, one of the things that we talk about a lot is everybody wants to get wrapped up in 107 versus 135 and different things, and one of the key things that I remind everybody is it doesn't really matter which operational standard you're flying under. What really matters is how you operate on the ground every day. We all have a set of rules, right? And you and I both go out onto the highway and we all get onto the interstate and we all have the same set of rules, and we have a piece of equipment that's met the same standards that everybody else is required to have, but one of us might make it to where we're going and the other one won't. And why? It's because of how we handled particular situational instances at that very moment. And so because we have been forced by or been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to do a lot of things first, right? I mean, we're delivering COVID test kits into neighborhoods, into residences. I mean, that's kind of a first. And when you do that, it's great, it's fun, but it's also an opportunity to not just damage our reputation, but to damage the industry's reputation and to change the narrative that is suddenly starting to shift positive back a few steps. And that doesn't just hurt DroneUp, that hurts everybody. And we recognize that. So what we've done is we've created a culture, we call it a culture of responsibility, accountability, and transparency. You know, when people found out that we were briefing the FAA on everything that we were doing, and we were briefing them even when we had minor incidences and tell them our lessons learned. I had somebody who is a former long-term FAA guy who's no longer with them pull me aside and said, Tom, you just need to be careful. You need to tell them what they need to hear and know more. And I said, I don't agree with you. And I will tell you that the relationship that we've built and the ability to have a conversation and a dialogue has allowed us to get through a lot of speculation about what the rules and regulations are and be able to get actionable outcomes. And so we're appreciative of that. And I'll tell you that culture we talked about is you'll start to see a little theme as I walk through it, because it may sound a little military-like, and just like Cliff was talking about his background and how that kind of drove how he approaches things today. Well, I spent a lot of time in the military. Charles spent a lot of time in public safety. And so when we do that, you know, that tends to live with us for a while. And so we have three kind of mantras when we show up at an evolution. Every day is the most important day we're there. And we have a pre-brief every day before we start. I'll talk about it. And this is the most important day. Every day is the most important day. The second thing that we do in our operations is that whether you've been on site for 100 days or whether you've been there for 10 minutes, you have the ability to pause and stop the operations. And we actually did have a guy stop the operation. He had been on site for about 4 minutes. He called pause because he didn't know where his jacket was, and it stopped the entire operation. There was no critical response, and no, I think somebody may have pulled him aside to have a conversation, but the point is we live by that. But the third thing that we always live by, and my guys get tired of hearing it, every time we launch a new operation, a new city, I go brief the team on day one, and they all hear this, and I say that it only takes one aw shit to wipe out 99 attaboys. And we could do it perfectly 99 times, and then number 100 goes bad and nobody remembers how well we did those 99. That's where we are in this industry right now. And so the way that we have started doing this, and again, people know we go do these operations and then we publish our ConOps, we publish our procedures, we publish everything that we're doing. And what we're doing right now is with detailed, we call them detailed and living ConOps. We just, for example, for our operations where we're delivering the COVID test kit, we have operational procedures that are 80 pages that you have to read before you're able to participate with us. And not just read, but you have to get tested on that 80-page document. We've actually had people who've said, I've studied more to be able to deliver a COVID test kit than I did my senior year of college. We have 3 hours of online training, another 2 hours of check rides. This is all before you're even allowed to step on site. The reason I point all this out is while we're all trying to figure out what the standards are, and while there's different people working on trusted operator programs and all of that, it is incumbent upon us in the industry to start developing processes and procedures that allow us to operate safely. And then I think what we need to do a better job of, and our industry has always been kind of hesitant to do it, is we need to share that information. I mean, one of the things that we've enjoyed in working with Indemnis as we're transitioning over to flight over people waiver status is exchanging data and information and learning and being transparent about our strengths, our weaknesses, and where the failures are. It's been very enjoyable. The other thing that we really are pushing right now is communication protocols. We have an entire communication protocol document that every single person has to learn, and they have to rehearse hours of talking and communicating over the radios before they're allowed to participate in an operation. And it allows us to develop that cadence. It allows us to do a lot of things, but the most important thing it allows us to do is to take an operator from Cheektowaga, New York, parachute them in to El Paso or Las Vegas, and day one, they're up and running. They plug and play in the operation. And that consistency in how we do things builds a cadence that Charles will appreciate when you're thinking about how we would do emergency response execution. There's a cadence you're looking for. And you notice when that cadence isn't right, when you don't hear something you should hear, or you don't see something that you should hear. And unfortunately, our industry is so new that I don't think we've necessarily built up that cadence where somebody can stand back looking at operations and say, is something not right here? Because we don't know yet what that cadence is. So we focused a lot on that. And then the last thing I'll say on that is that we talk about embracing transparency and failing forward. We, unfortunately, our industry right now, I said this at Interdrone over a year ago, I'll say it again now. There is a very significant hesitancy to be able to point out when we fail. And unfortunately, the manned aviation, general aviation has a loop back mechanism that allows them to do that. And in some cases, do it without fear of retribution. We don't have that in our industry yet. I think we need to develop. It needs to be an industry standard. Just to put it into perspective of what we've been doing just in the last 9 weeks, in addition to all of our commercial operations, and we're flying all over the world, but just related to COVID test kit deliveries, we've had 937 deliveries. These are deliveries from a Walmart parking lot into residences, either in the front yard or in the backyard. We've flown 1,619 miles for a total of 133 hours of flight time. And we've documented over 100 lessons learned. So we've hot washed every day. We've documented those lessons learned, and we're going to share those lessons learned with the industry. I'll give you a few of them. Some people, and then I'll close. Some people don't like these, but they are the case. Hire operators with a lot of hours. I mean, people say we're a new industry, so there aren't people who have a lot of hours. But if you're going to do a critical operation where you're going to take a drone with a package and a 2-stage delivery mechanism, and you're going to fly it into a neighborhood and over homes, you need to have your top operators. So we're not scared to say we're looking for the top and best operators. We'll train junior guys, but you're not going to operate. We have found that hiring current or former manned aviation pilots is proving to be incredibly valuable. They understand comms, they understand cadence, they understand checklist, they understand what ConOps mean. And then the last thing is remember that you need to develop maintenance programs, not just the maintenance programs that are kind of standard off-the-shelf programs that come from the manufacturer, but if you're using these platforms in a different way, where maybe you're using the arms lifting as part of the deployment process, you need to develop your own maintenance program for those arms inspection checklists. And if you're putting your other gear on there, which is unique gear specific for the mission that you're doing, you need to be developing. That's where we've had the biggest failure, is not on the maintenance of the manufacturer's components that we're inspecting and using. It's things that we've added on to help us accomplish our mission, for which we did not have maintenance programs. So that's another lesson learned.
All right, thank you very much, Tom. I've had the pleasure to watch one of Tom's operations, and I can tell you the things you just heard from him, he is a professional, and it shows throughout his operation. Thank you again. Next up, we have Charles Werner, and Charles is going to talk a little bit about his integration with public safety and how UAS can actually make the public can benefit from UAS. Thank you.
So as we got into unmanned aircraft systems, as Tom mentioned, this is a whole new environment for public safety. With the exception of those departments that had aviation wings, they already knew some things. We had helicopters and fixed wings, and they did specific missions, but UAS was totally new. So DroneResponders was formed to support the advancement of public safety unmanned aircraft system programs by putting up a resource center which has over 400 documents of SOPs, training bulletins, lessons learned. Again, what Tom mentioned, that sharing. We have found that sharing has been the key point of how agencies have been able to grow more quickly and learn faster for the programs. At first, being able to get up and fly and see something from the ground was exciting. And that was like, wow. And then as we've learned through the process, the streaming video, the real-time situational awareness, the capturing of information, made the realization that drones are really only a vehicle. And they're a vehicle that typically either is providing a data transport of one thing or another, whether it's visual optics or streaming video or whatever, or delivery of some type of delivery manner. But what we found is that we've got to provide this information so that people are making the right decisions. And some of the things that we're doing along with that is training is a big aspect of it. And if you look at the regulations, it's kind of funny because the FAA regulations require a commercial remote pilot to have a Part 107 certificate, which is basically only a knowledge test. And that knowledge test is 70% out of 100, which really surprises me. It should be like, why isn't it 95? It's okay to miss 30 questions, but in any case, it doesn't get any practical applications. So what we're doing is we're working with ASTM's professional requirements for public safety remote pilots and helping to bring that to light. And we're tying it into the NIST standard test methods for unmanned aircraft systems as usually as a proficiency model, so that we're trying to create this new expectation and requirement that you're able to not only have the knowledge of the airspace, but you're also proficient at flying the aircraft in the missions that you're going to be flying. We also found it necessary to work with the Center of Naval Analysis to create a ConOps template for departments having UAS. Who are they going to be working with in these situations? Who do they need to communicate with, and so on. But when you talk about safety, let me get specifically into this. We did safety because we were using it to help us save lives. It would be to find a lost person, to do searches during disasters, to do an overwatch during a fire, to do drops of flotation devices to save swimmers that are in trouble, and a whole list of other things. Law enforcement with Overwatch. But what we quickly learned is that not only was it made it safer for the civilians that we're trying to serve, because we're able to be more effective in our operation, safer in our operation, and be able to do and see things better, we were also now protecting the responders. The responders are not having to put themselves in harm's way. So for example, when the Hawaii fissures and volcanic activity occurred, drones were flying and looking for people, but also detecting sulfur dioxide, which was warning us of where we need to make evacuations. In previous cases, you may have had people that had to actually do that monitoring. Same thing as within a transportation accident or a radiation incident. The monitoring can now be done from remote capabilities. And the same thing is true. Think about law enforcement. When they go into a situation of a person inside a building, and just within the past 2 weeks, there was a video on showing Atlanta Police Department flying a drone into an apartment for a murder suspect, identifying the suspect, and through speaker gave instructions, put your hand on your head and walked out. And that's what the guy did. There was no other interaction. And then another great example is Chula Vista, California, where they're doing drone as a first responder program. It's flying initially from the dispatch, getting over the scene and providing real-time information. But one call really played out importantly. They had a person who was reported with a gun outside of a restaurant at a table. And as they took the drone and zoomed in, they were quickly able to determine he had a cigarette lighter gun. And that dramatically changed the whole situation, de-escalated it. They walked in, the situation was solved, where otherwise the person may have been inadvertently killed because not knowing it wasn't a weapon. So I think what we're seeing across the board, drones are making a huge difference. They're providing safety for the responder and the civilians. They're making our decisions more effective. They're providing real-time situational awareness, and they're great tools for monitoring recovery operations.
Thanks so much, Charles. Appreciate all of your kind of opening thoughts and comments. Now we'll dig into a couple of questions for each of you. We'll start with you, Tom, if you don't mind, but everybody can kind of feel free to chime in or opine in with whatever your thoughts are. So each of you have been in the industry for quite some time now, and you've seen a lot of change probably over the past 5 or more years. In your view, what has been the evolution of safety in the industry? And what are some of the key drivers of that from your perspective?
Well, I think from our perspective and what I've seen, and when I say ours, I mean our industry and the drone services industry, is safety for us years ago and for our colleagues was adhering and not violating Part 107, right? I mean, we didn't really know what global operations looked like. We didn't know what a 6-person drone operation looked like. So our focus on safety was making sure that we were following Part 107. But what we've realized is Part 107 is really in many, many ways geared towards that single operator to ensure that when you're out as a RPIC and you're flying by yourself, or maybe with a VO, and that's the way the rules are written, here's the thing you need to do. But when you're doing large scale operations where there's 6, 7, 8 people on the ground and there's VOs and there's other people doing things and you're all interacting, we've kind of realized we needed to develop our own safety programs and we needed to develop our own training programs. And I've seen all of the mature companies start to do that, where it's not just about staying out of trouble. It's about being able to lay groundworks and plans and training programs that'll allow us to scale to whatever the next thing is. And I know we'll probably talk about that before it's over with. But the other thing is it's also the narrative has shifted. So one of the things I tell people all the time is that, you know, a year ago, you had a better chance of getting hit by a stray golf ball in your bedroom than you did the news running a positive story about drones. Fast forward a year later, the narrative has shifted. There's a lot more desire for the drones to be in the neighborhoods and closer to human activity. And now all of a sudden, we're not out flying just construction sites and we're not flying power lines. We're actually moving into the neighborhoods. And it's put a lot of pressure on those of us in the industry to start taking responsibility for our own safety, not just what the FAA imposes on us. And I've seen that pretty pervasive in public safety and in commercial services.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tom. Yep. Anyone else want to chime in on that, on kind of where you've seen the evolution of safety?
So for us, I would say that, you know, I echo a lot of what Tom said as far as protocols and standardization of processes and repeatability. I think the number one risk to the drone industry, and we've said it for the last 5 years, is that there is going to eventually be some irresponsible operator and some catastrophic event. We can all hope and do what we can and do our part to prevent that, but that is our biggest fear. And with that, it's going to set that back. So for us, the evolution of safety really started years ago with trying to nail down those guidelines. We don't oppose stricter rules, stricter protocols, stricter standards, benchmarks, but our main thing is we want to know what they are. We want there to actually be some common ground so that we can start to work toward it. We want to know, hey, if you achieve this, then you get A, B, C, and D. And I think, you know, the FAA is not perfect and we all have our challenges, but, you know, they also have a big battle themselves to run uphill with. And we, I think, are all working collectively together and hoping that there does eventually become a really streamlined process. And that, you know, when you talk about transparency, one of the reasons that Indemnis has always been successful is it's because we provide our customers all the information, all the data, our testing, our failures, our strengths, how we got there. So when it comes to safety, you know, there are other areas, especially when you consider that safety isn't just about the physical safety of life and property on the ground. You have national security, remote ID, beyond visual line of sight. What is out there that you can't see? But I think collectively, everything is progressing, and the more and more that industry partners work together to provide regulatory bodies the information to be able to make educated decisions, the faster our industry will advance. Innovation is cool. Everybody wants the best, newest thing. So I think the technology exists. Now we just have to create the rules and the protocols to get everybody on board so that we can operate safely within the airspace.
And I'll just add, I think that what the really important part is that we evolve toward really understanding the risk assessment piece. I know my colleague from FDNY, Michael Leo, will say he knows he has success when his remote pilots come back and say, we didn't fly because the conditions didn't support the operation. So that's, you know, instead of us thinking as firefighters or police officers or whatever, that we just got to go do it because we're used to taking these risks. It really is having that manned mindset of the aircraft and working with the FAA to make sure that we're maintaining that safety of the national airspace. So our evolution now, I think, is with the training and the standards, to get those standards in place to say, what does a proficient public safety remote pilot look like?
Yeah,
okay.
Good point.
Thank you, Charles. Okay, so next question I'm going to direct initially to Amber. So looking into your crystal ball, Amber, what events on the horizon do you see as being turning points for the industry, especially from the safety perspective? And you know, there's a lot we hear as bell ringers: remote ID, 5G, type certification, wider adoption. Take your pick.
Well, let's all hope that in December we get a rule for operations over people. I think that's a big one that we're all waiting for. You know, we've seen the draft NPRM, and, you know, fingers crossed, that is definitely one on the horizon. And also, you know, the things that Tom's team's doing, the things that Charles's team is doing are all instrumental. All of these small projects working toward repeatability and doing it safely are going to help the industry. But the number one thing is, you know, the technology is there, it's advanced. Nobody thought 20 years ago that we'd be walking around with computers stuck to our head, right? And I truly believe that in 20 years, we're going to be walking around with little computers flying over our head. And it is the reality. We've built our company on making commercial regulated flight over people possible, drone delivery possible, making it safe. And we do truly believe that. So that's my crystal ball. We're going to make drone delivery possible.
Okay, thank you. Tom or Charles, do you want to chime in on this one?
Well, I think that remote ID, all those things you said, operations over people, they're going to be the important pieces. But I think the parachutes on the aircraft are very important as well, especially when it comes to counter UAS. I mean, a drone with a parachute on it is, if you bring it down a certain way, the parachute's going to make a difference in that. And I think that's, all these things are the key to what the acceptance is going to be. So we're just looking forward to the progress. I mean, we're looking for the beyond visual line of sight. We're looking for the detect and avoid technologies that help, like we're seeing some of the Skydio stuff come out with. So a lot of those things are going to make the aircraft safer to use and more adopted. And I think Amber's vision is the Jetsons.
Yeah.
Which most people don't even know what that is.
I do. So I'll just be very brief on this one. I think we've already hit the biggest turning point, and the biggest turning point is the industry is beginning to adopt a responsibility to self-regulate and develop safety standards that keep us safe and our operators safe. To your point, I get so disappointed when I get a phone call from New York or wherever, and they say we didn't fly today because of winds. I'm like, well, what were they? And they said they're 18. I'm like, come on, man. But at the end of the day, they're making the call, and it's the right call. I think that's a big shift that doesn't get enough attention, that the industry, to what Charles just said, that people are willing to start making decisions and not rely upon what does the manufacturer say or what does the FAA say, but using responsibility in their operations. I think that's a turning point that it was maybe the most significant one. I don't know what the next one is.
Excellent point. Thanks, Tom. So next question that we have for you is, as we all know, there's really no such thing as aviation without risk. And the key question is, what level of risk is the public, and thereby the FAA, ultimately willing to accept? So what do you think, where do you think this lies today, and how will that alter as we move toward more widespread advanced operations, such as flight over people, beyond visual line of sight, and things of that nature? And I'll toss any one of you who wants to go first on this one. Amber, you're unmuted, so that's going to be you.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. What is the accepted level of risk? So that's a loaded question. Indemnis has done countless hours of testing around this. We have taken our drones, in addition to the ASTM testing, we are the only parachute company that has also done human injury testing. So we have tested our drones into cadavers, ATDs, over and over, every orientation, side of the head, top down, forward, and really, what is the residual risk that is left? Do you use the established aviation standards for human injury? Do you use the automotive industry standards for human injury? Do you use the NHL standards for concussion? There are all these standards, and the FAA or all regulatory bodies, someone needs to just say, this is the benchmark and this is the methodology. This is how we get there. This is how we are avoiding the residual risk. Not only are we putting a parachute on it to decrease the descent speed, we are also going to follow our safety protocols, train our pilots, fly a calculated route. There are so many different things that you can do to decrease the risk of an operation and make it safe in today's world. We need that standard. We need that guideline. There is an ever moving goalpost right now in the industry. And until everything comes together, I think that's a loaded question. What is the residual risk there, Justin?
Acceptable residual risk.
Well, let me add to what Amber said. I think that the level of acceptable risk depends on, one, the mission. So for public safety, the level of risk accepted is higher because we're going in dangerous situations to help remedy or mitigate the incident. But I think the real key to this is the work that's done by the companies that are doing the missions and flights. I mean, so we've seen since the hurricanes in 2017 and 2018 in the wildfires, the acceptance being greater now of the flights of drones in those situations. But we've also seen on the private sector, from the work that DroneUp has done, the work that Wing has done, that integration or conversation with the public as to what we're doing and informing them and letting them be recipients of the value of that. So when you start bringing coffee, burritos, or in Tom's case, test kits to people that benefit them, they're willing to look at things a little bit differently.
I think you make a great point there, Charles, and you stole on our last question. Our next question was really good.
Can I just address that question real quick?
Yeah, no, please do, Tom. Yeah, go for it.
I mean, Amber said something earlier, and both of these questions were in terms of what is the risk, but I think even in the question you missed the public, right? And we used to have a saying back in the teams that the acceptable level of risk of getting shot changes after you've been shot once. And in this particular case, we haven't had a major incident that's really defined the potential impact of these operations. And I don't want it. I don't want it. But Amber said it. It's going to happen. We're going to have a drone crash. We're going to have these things happen. So it's really difficult for anyone, the public or anybody, to say what's the acceptable level of risk when the reality is we haven't experienced the negative impact of these things happening to a degree that allows us to set a benchmark. God forbid it happens. I think Amber's right. I think it will. I just hope it doesn't happen on my watch.
Well, but we have had some drone crashes, like in stadiums and some other places. I mean, the good news is, with the exception of the larger aircraft, the smaller ones that fly, based on the evidence that we have and the tests that have been done, the chance of serious injury are not as great. Now, as they get up in scale in the higher level ones, then it's going to be that way. But I was going to say the level of risk acceptable is until we crash, but I was trying to stay away from that. So Tom hit it though.
I think you're right. And well, and Charles, we've had this discussion, in the past, but that's one of the things that I'm curious what you all think about this, but you kind of alluded to it, Charles, where, historically in aviation, we have a accepted level of risk across the board. But really with UAS, is there a need for the FAA and for industry to start to take a look at more of a dynamic risk matrix, where you're not only looking at the risk that's presented, but the benefit on the other side? As Charles mentioned, in public safety, there's a benefit on the other side. I've told this story, a number of times, where I also am a firefighter, and, back when I was 17 years old, driving an ambulance through the streets, to a person with a stomach ache at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're flying, through red lights and, probably faster than we should be, but no one ever flipped me off. No one ever called and complained, even though that's a slightly, I'm a professional, within reason, but it's a risky operation to go lights and sirens to a call. But the public accepts that risk because they know that, generally speaking, there's a public safety benefit on the other side. And I think the same thing, there is probably a place for that. And it's a difficult thing to really, to kind of articulate and to put into a scale or a dynamic matrix, but it's something that ought to be considered.
I'll just add to it, though. I think that that the type certification is going to be important, that it defines the level of acceptable aircraft to fly over people. And I think parachutes are going to be a part of that equation, that if people know that there's certain aircraft that's flying with parachutes, they're going to have a higher level of acceptance.
Yeah, for sure. And we've certainly seen that. And we're seeing that out of the FAA, where at least we know that the FAA feels a little more comfortable when these aircraft have a parachute, from what we're seeing out of the flight over people proposed rule. So, and we really hope that comes out soon.
And you also said something about acceptance of FAA realizing the mission. An example of their willingness to start modifying and going in that direction is with the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver with public safety, that now allows us to fly in dangerous missions within a limited respect. So I think there is that learning that we're both having, and we're finding the sweet spot of how that works.
I think you're spot on there, Charles. And the last question that we really had for the group, we kind of just hit on, talking about public safety operations and the public risk calculation. So we'll pivot a little and ask you just a more general question as we move forward here. Cliff and I are based here in the DC area. I know Charles and Tom, you guys are pretty close. Amber, you're not close at all, but here, basically all of the oxygen has been sucked out of the room by the presidential election and all the politics that are going on. And there's, regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, things obviously in DC with, a lot of the agencies, the DOT, the White House, are going to change pretty substantially here in the next couple of weeks. And where do you see the drone industry kind of moving, over the next several months or year into a new administration? And like I said, you don't have to get into the politics of it necessarily. In fact, I just did a a presentation a couple of weeks ago talking about this, saying that essentially the drone market's not going anywhere, and regardless who gets elected president and what happens in the administration, it's going to move forward. But we will see some differences in priorities. You may have a different take on the Office of Science and Technology policy in a would-be Biden administration versus some new players at DOT or FAA. So curious to think where you see things kind of just going overall over the next year or more.
I'll start. So I've already seen where there's interest on from both campaigns, before the election and even now, of what do we need to be doing next. I think that under the current administration, the IPP was important. It got us into experimental phases to learn some things and do some things that otherwise wouldn't have happened. But I seem to feel there's an interest in the next administration to find out how do we move this forward equally. So I think regardless of how this turns out in the end, I think we'll still continue to move forward because we've had such great successes. And while COVID-19 has had a lot of negatives, during this time, we've seen some flourishing of unmanned aircraft systems that we might not have seen without COVID-19.
Very true. Anything from Amber or Tom? Are you guys good on this one?
I'll just say that I have spoken with as many of the drones in my fleet as I've had the opportunity, and their response was that regardless of who was in office, they intended to continue the missions as they were directed by the operators. So I feel pretty confident that they'll stay up to the task regardless of who's in office.
I think you're probably right. Excellent. Well, get Amber?
Oh, I was just going to add, I mean, drones are here to stay. Their use is widespread, and we're all in this. We're not going to stop pushing it forward regardless of where the administration goes. We'll take each task as it comes, and we're excited about safety. We're excited about the future of it, and I don't think any politics are going to change that.
I think the future,
we're not going to let it, Justin.
That's right.
Yeah, in the future going forward, I think we're going to see vaccine deliveries. So we're looking forward to DroneUp being able to help solve the problem.
Absolutely. And I mean, like you said, everybody's excited about getting their coffees, getting their COVID tests, being involved in the innovation. And that alone, COVID has helped drone delivery in the sense that everybody wants to be a part of it. Hey, I got to participate in this. I got one of the first coffees delivered out at Virginia Tech. I was super excited. That was years ago now. And so it is cool. It's fun to be involved, and we're slowly making that shift to have widespread adoption, and safety is a big part of that. So thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Amber. Thank you, Charles, Tom, and my partner in crime, Cliff, for all of your, taking the time to join us today, especially Amber. I know it's start a little earlier for you, especially. But thank you, everyone. This has been great. And also, again, thanks to AUVSI's Silicon Valley chapter, and Greg and Jennifer Deeds for really helping us pull this together. And we're going to post this out and look forward to if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email myself or Cliff, and we'll get those questions out to Tom, Charles, or Amber, and hopefully they'll be willing to answer them back. One other thing I wanted to note, Charles does have a really interesting, about 8-minute video, I believe it is, Charles, that kind of goes over and gives a brief synopsis of a lot of the different public safety use cases by drones in the past couple of months and years. So we'll post that along with this and try to include it right at the end. Once again, thank you, everyone. We hope that this has been a successful Drone Safety Awareness Week yet again, and we look forward to seeing everyone next time.